Hey there everyone, I wanted to talk to you today about how to do some self-auditing. This was not something that I was ever taught. It's just something that I've kind of picked up as I've gone and realized that I wish I was taught, because it really helps us catch errors as much as possible. We're all humans, so we're all going to make some errors, especially with numbers and charges and all that fun stuff. So I want to go through some things that can maybe help you in your process of self-auditing, as well as help the business to make sure that we are catching as many errors as possible and avoiding future problems in audits. So I kind of want to talk to you first about why self-auditing is so important. So the biggest thing is any mismatched information, whether that's minutes, charges, etc., that all looks negatively on us and makes us more likely to have an audit or to be looked at more closely for an audit. And we're responsible, unfortunately, for any of those errors. We have to pay back as a clinic if we are audited and caught with that information. So any incorrect math or anything makes us look inconsistent and therefore makes us more likely to be audited. Whereas the opposite, having correct information and making sure that we have processes in place to make sure we're catching those things, makes us look more responsible and reliable and more on top of what we're doing. This also can make you more valuable to your own company. If you can come in, in the future, you can put on possibly on your resume, just say like, I'm very good at self-auditing. I check through my own work to make sure that it's correct, and make it less likely to have errors so that I'm not costing the business any money. So it's a really strong point for you as well, just to have those skills. It's also good for yourself for learning for future errors to avoid. So maybe there's one thing that we consistently do wrong, like regularly leave out some piece of information, or maybe you forget to put in your like manual therapy descriptions or something like that. So it's really good for catching yourself. That way in the future you know what you need to work on to improve, because we are always improving as physical therapists. And the biggest thing for us here is that we are our best checks and balances system. We don't have any computer program or outside people looking at our work unless an audit of some kind is done. So we are the best way to catch what's going on with us. So, catching your own problems as well as catching other people's problems so that we can fix them and learn and make these errors less often. The other big thing to know is with rebilling information, we can also make ourselves more profitable by catching those errors if we underbilled. Because if we underbill, we only have X number of days to rebill that correctly and get that money. And it's only like 30 to 60 days for most insurances. However, even though we can't rebill, they can take the money back 3, 5+ years in the future. Of course, this is all different for different insurances, so I don't know the exact numbers, but they can take it back much further out than we can charge them for it. So if we catch it early enough, we can rebill correctly and get that money back that we would have lost. So next I wanted to go over some common errors that happen in our billing. Uncovered some of these with the Medicaid audit this last year. So the first and the biggest one that happened the most was charging different charges than what was actually written in your objective in your note. So for example, you wrote in your note that you did 2 therapeutic exercise and 2 therapeutic activity, and then you billed for 3 exercise and 1 activity. So the problem with that is that we owe back any differences between those 2 amounts. So in some cases it worked out well, where the amount that we billed was around the same amount and it kind of canceled itself out. However, if you write it entirely wrong, like say you wrote 3 therapeutic exercise and then you billed for 4 therapeutic exercise, we owe back that whole unit of therapeutic exercise, whatever they paid for it. The next biggest problem was visits being outside of the plan of care range, or outside of the 10th visit for Medicare. So if they are out of the plan of care and it's not a reevaluation starting the plan of care again, then any of those visits are owed back. So if they had 3, 5, 6 massages or PT visits since they were supposed to have a reevaluation, then all of those visits would be owed back. So that's a big chunk if we're not catching that. The next one was incorrect math. So if you added up your numbers incorrectly and then the minutes were wrong, that can be definitely a big downfall. Missing total time or the in and out time in the top corner, you have to have at least one of those, but both is more ideal and they should match one another. And then missing the physician's signature. So that's more of a front desk thing. They're gonna try to make sure that that gets returned back to us. And we have a better system for this now, so we should catch it better this year. Duplicate billing, so entering it one time and then forgetting that you entered it and entering it another time. So that's why it's really important that when we enter our charges that we're really careful that we entered what we meant to enter and we only enter it one time. And then after that is proving medical necessity. So all of our notes need to be very clear on what was done that day, but also in why that service was important and why that was medically necessary and not just performed that day by a physical therapist, because that's not considered skilled. So we didn't read terribly closely on these, but honestly it's something that we all need to be working on all the time, because we all get a little bit lazy and just making sure we wrote what we did that day and not necessarily proving the future benefit of it. So. Alright, so next I wanted to go over some things that we can do on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and a monthly basis that can help us to improve on this. So the first is every visit. So on each visit, you should be checking the previous visit's math, whether it was yours or someone else's, before you edit it to your own day of visits. Make sure that you're checking that. Does it add up? Is the final number matching? All that good stuff, okay? If you see something that is wrong, say something. Again, we are our biggest checks and balances system. So if you don't say something, we can't improve on it and in the future make it better. And that goes for me too. I tell people all the time, please tell me if you catch something in mine that doesn't look right. I'm not perfect, we're all not perfect, so there should be some errors at some point in time and we can work on fixing that. For the people who are already credentialed, nobody is reading our notes all that regularly. I go back every now and then and check a few notes, just a sampling from the day to make sure that those all looked right, but obviously I'm not reading every note. So you are your best balances, and you should really be double checking everything that you put in to be trustworthy as signing all by yourself and not having anybody worrying about what you have going on. So next, make sure you double check your charges that you have written before you've entered your charges. So this is part of why I frequently tell people try to sign your note before you put the charges in, because if you go back, say you put your charges in beforehand and you put in 4 Therax, and then later you're editing your note and finishing it and you realize, oh, you know what, I think I did 1 Theract on that note. So you put 3 Therax and 1 Theract written. Well, now we've put the wrong charges in, because we changed our mind at a later point when we were editing. So just make sure you're really solid, that you've finished the objective section, you know what your minutes are before you put those charges in, and you make sure that they're right as often as possible. We also don't want to be constantly making errors that Miguel has to correct. Every now and then is fine because we're all going to make mistakes, but we don't want to be doing that constantly because that's taking up extra time that he could be doing other work as far as billing. Alright, so the other daily things that we can do, if you have a Medicare patient, make sure that you're checking what visit number they're on each time. This is super easy if you just check it when you right-click to create from a prior note. Take a quick glance at that little listing of prior notes. If you notice there's not a reeval in the box, you're probably due for a reeval. If you realize that the reeval is 8 visits prior, look ahead and see like, okay, well today is 9, so then the next visit is a massage. Whoops, I need to do a reeval today, because that massage would then be outside of the plan of care. So again, 10th visits, just a refresher, the eval counts as 1, but then the first reeval is number 10. So from there, after the reeval, you start at 1 again to get to 10. So if a massage is gonna fall on the 10th visit, we would owe back that massage visit because we didn't reevaluate the plan of care, progress note the plan of care on the 10th visit, okay? And if there's someone that you can schedule, like they need a reeval in a couple of visits and it's PT, then just ask the front desk to go ahead and schedule that right then so that nobody forgets when it comes to the day of. And I'll make a separate part of this video to go over how to check what charges you've put in. You might already know how to do this, but I'll just run you through it so that you can go and double check yourself if you're like, ooh, I really don't remember what I entered when I put my charges in, but I want to make sure that I match. So I'll cover that in a minute. So the next set category is once a week. So about once a week, I usually go click back through each day, sometimes through the whole month if I haven't checked it recently. I'll click back through each day and make sure that each of them has the note and the charge symbol present on all of them. And then I check the unfinished documentation section to make sure that that has all the way back to at least a month that all my notes are finished, and then any co-signing that I have is finished. Okay. You also want to check if there's any other open notes with your name on them. Make sure that they're ones that you were supposed to have deleted. And if they are, you can either delete them or ask me to delete them for you. All right, so that's all the once a week. And then once a month, I usually try to take a little bit of time if I've got a cancellation to do a couple of extra things that will really help in the long run. So the first is I always make sure to glance at the massage therapist columns for my patient and make sure that I'm not missing any patients that I'm like, oh, this person's had like 6 massages and they were supposed to be doing PT, but they didn't. So frequently that happens where we miss that they haven't been scheduled or they canceled their PT visits or something. So always check your massage therapist columns as well. So every month I try to look, the newest thing we're trying to do is try to look 3 months back. So we're in January now, so then I would look back to, let's see, December, November, October range. So I'm going to look in through October's month. I'm just going to click through each day and kind of look at names, check any evals, make sure that they're still coming. This will help us catch people who dropped off for unknown reasons, or maybe they dropped off and we knew it, but we didn't get the formal discharge written for them. So you'll go through each of those evals, make sure like, okay, yes, this person's good, this person's still coming, oop, that one needs a discharge, and just write yourself a list of like a future to-do list. Or a future call list, like if there's someone that you're like, oh, I don't know what happened with them, I should put them on a call list to find out. And then of course any of them that are not coming anymore or that were intended to be discharged but maybe got missed, make sure that those patients have a discharge, and if not, put them on your to-do list to write an absent discharge. If you're unsure how to write an absent discharge, please let me know. I can give you some examples and show you how to do it. The other thing that I look at the monthly mark is to look at 1 month prior. So I've looked at 3 months prior, now I'm looking at 1 month prior. And if this is something that seems overwhelming to you to do once a month, because that's a lot of days, you could also switch this to being a weekly thing if it's easier to keep up with. So I'll go back to the last month and kind of look at my Medicare patients, make sure that I'm not seeing someone that I haven't re-evaled in a long time. And then I'll try to check like 1 patient per day, like 1 note, to make sure that those charges and the written note match. So just randomly select someone, like maybe you do every 3 o'clock for that week or whatever, and right click them, check the note, and then check the charges, which I'll show you in a minute. Just to make sure that they match, and that way that you're not, you may catch some of your errors by randomly selecting 1 patient per day. Again, you're not going to check every single note because there's not enough time in the world for that. And then also just making sure, again, like you did on the 3 months prior, that there's anybody that you haven't seen in a little bit, or maybe that you thought you meant to do a re-eval on, that you're checking those and checking they're still within the plan of care. All right, guys, now we're going to go over how to view charges you entered before. So one option is to, in the patient's information, go to the incident. Then option number 2 is to go on the main screen to patient records in the top left corner. You can enter their name, and then you're going to double click on their name, which will open their patient information tab. This gives you options of incidents on the middle, and you double click the incident. Then in the incident, you're going to click the insurance and financial information tab, followed by the charge/payment listing button in the bottom right. And that's going to pop you up a page, and I put a couple examples of what it would look like with multiple charges in a day versus 1 charge in a day. And you should not be able to edit anything on these pages. The other thing we'll go through is how to view unfinished notes if you don't already remember how to do this. On the main page on the top, you're going to click Documentation and View Unfinished Documentation. Here you have a spot where you're going to enter some info. I put the date about a month back so that I catch everything in case I miss something, and then click the All box, because otherwise it will not show you all of your notes that have cosigners, etc. And click Search. So then finally we have a few examples of what it looks like if you don't have a cosigner, if you have a cosigner and neither have signed, or if you have a cosigner and you've signed but the cosigner isn't done yet. Alright guys, thanks so much for listening to this video on how to self-audit. There will be a handout that will help you remember all these and kind of lay out that once a day, once a week, once a month kind of things. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We will go over questions on the staff meeting coming up in February. So write down any questions that you have and we'll talk about them then. Thank you so much.